Outside of Hollywood, there are few spotlights as bright as the one Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer aimed at Speaker Mike Johnson Tuesday after leaders of both houses met with the president.
I've been around here a long time. It's maybe 4 or 5 times that history is looking over your shoulder. And if you don't do the right thing, whatever the immediate politics are, you will regret it. I told him 2 years from now and every year after that.
Schumer was referring to funding for Ukraine. The aid is so tied to the country's military success that, according to Politico, officials told senators one soldier followed a congressional funding vote on his phone while Russian artillery exploded nearby. Schumer said the message from all leaders of both parties to Johnson was, get it done. But can he? It is unclear whether the speaker can wrangle a Republican majority, and passing something with Democrats, which would also avoid a government shutdown, cost Johnson's predecessor his job and might risk his. Weijia Jiang is at the White House with more details.
President Biden told congressional leaders this morning that the time to send Ukraine more money is now.
I think the consequences of inaction every day in Ukraine are dire.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, who has refused to allow a vote on new funding for Ukraine, was pressed by everyone in the room, including his Republican colleague, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
The meeting on Ukraine was one of the most intense I have ever encountered in my many meetings in the Oval Office.
What made this meeting one of the most intense you've ever had here in the White House?
The urgency of supporting Ukraine and the consequences to the people of America.
But Speaker Johnson came out of the meeting undeterred, insisting on action to address the southern border first.
We must take care of America's needs first. When you talk about America's needs, you have to talk first about our open border.
Another top focus today, the looming government shutdown. Several federal agencies run out of money in 3 days, and all of them could close 1 week from Friday. Hard-right Republicans, who have brought the government to the brink of a shutdown 3 times in 6 months, are now pressuring Johnson to include a list of demands that could kill a funding deal, like cutting funding for background checks to buy guns, cutting incentives for buying electric vehicles, and defunding Planned Parenthood.
Families are living paycheck to paycheck.
Bessa Pinchatti runs a support group for military families that rely on the federal nutrition program, WIC, which would not be available if the government closes.
That's a huge problem. That's the safety net that so many families rely on.
And Weijia joins us now. Weijia, intense is one word would use, a word that was used. How else would you characterize, or how else are other people characterizing the tenor of that meeting?
Oh, John, intense is certainly the word of the day here at the White House because all parties used it to describe what happened. But I think I would say that inaction when it comes to Ukraine would also be a proper word, because the fact is that even though this was tense, intense, whatever you want to say, the bottom line is that the ball didn't move when it comes to this supplemental national aid package that would provide additional funding for Ukraine and Israel. The message even was the same, which is that we have to take action now, that this is dire, not only for Ukraine, but for national security here at home as well. I think the difference is, as our colleagues have been reporting from Ukraine, that they are losing ground, that money is not there anymore, and that President Volodymyr Zelensky has been very outspoken about how, whether he wins or loses really hinges on whether or not the U.S. is able to give more money to Ukraine. And that's why they really ramped up the pressure here, because it was everybody in the room against House Speaker Mike Johnson. But, John, it's not only about pressure from those leaders. He is facing pressure within his own party not to move on Ukraine aid until something is done at the border. In fact, his colleagues have threatened to remove him, which is what happened to former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
So as you mentioned in your piece, Speaker Johnson left the meeting still emphasizing the need to address the border. But of course, Democratic leaders worked on a border piece of legislation for months with the Senate. The House wouldn't bring it up. House Republican leader Johnson wouldn't bring it up. So is there any conversation about border that's realistic or that's even happening? If that's a possible solution, they already tried that once. The House wouldn't bring it up. Is anybody talking about the border?
So after the meeting with all of the congressional leaders, President Biden and House Speaker Johnson met face-to-face privately. It was their first one-on-one meeting ever. And afterward, Johnson came out and he said that I told the president that he has the authority to do something right now at the border. So he is suggesting that President Biden use executive action, that they don't go down the legislative route, but that the president do something to limit access to this country. And we do know through our reporting that the White House is considering executive action to allow the president to use a law from the 1950s that would essentially allow him to restrict the way that people come here and apply for asylum. Now, this is the same law that former President Trump used in many cases to restrict migrants, which is why there's already so much blowback. But we do know that's under consideration. That's what Republicans and Johnson are pushing the White House to do. And if it happens, we expect we'll hear in the next week and a half or so. But, John, if that is the route Biden goes down, he will face serious political consequences from his own party as well.
Weijia Jiang at the White House, thank you.